The morning air was sharp, colder than the thin blanket that had failed to warm Jin-hee through the night. She rose quietly, careful not to wake her children. Mi-sun lay curled against her younger brother, both of them huddled together like sparrows in a broken nest. Their cheeks were hollow, their lips pale. Even in sleep, their ribs pressed through the thin fabric of their clothes, reminders of how hunger carved itself into the body. Ginny stepped outside, clutching the empty tin bowl she carried each morning to the ration line. The street smelled of smoke and sewage, but no food. Neighbors shuffled in silence, bowls and buckets in hand, their eyes fixed on the ground. Speaking too much in line was dangerous. Every word might be overheard by someone eager to report a wrong thought. When her turn came, the soldier behind the counter scooped a ladle of watery corn broth into her tin. A few stray grains floated in the murky liquid. Jin-hee bowed, murmuring thanks, though her chest burned with shame. Everyone bowed. Everyone thanked. It was survival. To complain was to vanish. As she carried the bowl home, the weight of it felt cruelly light. Her children would slurp it down in minutes, and then the day would stretch before them with nothing left. She passed a wall plastered with the leader's smiling portrait, slogan beneath declaring, "Our people are always full, thanks to his love." Ginhee bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, swallowing the anger that might betray her face. At home, Mi-sun stirred awake as the broth was poured into chipped cups. "Mama," she whispered, "will there be more tomorrow?" He forced a smile she didn't feel. "Yes, my little bird. Tomorrow will be better." But she knew tomorrow would be the same. Hunger was not a passing storm. Here it was a chain the regime wrapped around every throat. That night, as the village gathered to chant slogans in praise of the leader, Ginny stood in the crowd, her stomach twisting. She clapped when told to clap. She smiled when ordered to smile. And deep inside, she made a vow no one could hear. She would not let her children starve quietly, not while she still had breath. That night, long after the chants and forced applause had faded, Jin-hee sat by the dim glow of a single candle. The silence of her home was broken only by the soft breathing of her children. Their bellies were barely warmed by the thin broth, yet exhaustion had claimed them. She watched them, her heart aching. Every mother's instinct was to feed, to protect, but in North Korea, even that was rebellion. Underneath the loose floorboard by the stove, Jin-hee kept her secret. She carefully lifted it, her hands trembling as though she were handling explosives. Hidden beneath was a tiny pouch of rice, no more than a handful. It was all that remained from the time her cousin had smuggled food from the border before disappearing. That pouch was her lifeline, her defiance against a world that demanded she bow to hunger and call it loyalty. She touched the grains with her fingertips, fighting back tears. One bowl of this rice could keep her children alive another day. But if the Korean soldiers discovered it during inspection, she would be branded a traitor. Starvation was punishment enough, but hiding food? That was seen as theft from the leader himself. Still, she couldn't let her children's ribs cut deeper into their skin. She took a few grains, wrapped them in cloth, and hid them inside her sleeve. Tomorrow, she would find a way to cook them in secret quietly, carefully, while the village was distracted. As dawn approached, Ginny slipped outside to fetch water. Streets were silent, except for the faint sound of boots marching in the distance. A patrol of Korean soldiers passed by, their rifles glinting in the early light. Ginhee bowed low, keeping her face to the ground. One wrong expression could cost her everything. When the soldiers disappeared, she straightened and whispered to herself, "For Mi-sun, for Dae-hyun." Her voice trembled but carried resolve. She knew the risk. She knew hunger was designed to break her into obedience. But as long as her children breathed, she would gamble with danger. Because in a country where even rice was treason, a mother's love was her only weapon. The morning began with the crackle of a loudspeaker. From every corner of the village, the metallic voice of propaganda echoed. Loyalty is proven not by words, but by sacrifice. Those who betray the leader betray their own blood. Ginhee pulled her children close as they prepared to walk to the ration station. Her heart raced, not because of hunger, but because of what she carried inside her sleeve, the tiny cloth pouch of rice she had managed to keep. Hidden overnight, every step felt heavy, as if the eyes of the regime bore down on her. They did. Along the road, portraits of the leader loomed above, staring down like eternal judges. Neighbors bowed when they passed, their faces pale, their movements robotic. Even children lowered their eyes, as if afraid that innocence itself could be read as defiance. Korean soldiers stood near the station, rifles slung casually, but their gazes sharp. Gin-hee avoided their eyes, clutching her children's hands tightly. She forced a small smile, though inside she was trembling. The memory of rumors burned in her mind. A woman dragged away last month for hiding cornmeal under her bed. No one had seen her since. Inside the ration hall, people stood in long lines, silent and hollow-eyed. The clerk at the counter weighed portions with deliberate cruelty, always measuring a little less than promised. When Gin-hee received her portion, barely enough to survive, another day she bowed low, hiding the flicker of bitterness in her expression. But the real terror came afterward. As she left, she noticed a woman from her neighborhood, Mrs. Kung, watching her closely. Mrs. Kung's eyes lingered too long, sharp and suspicious. In North Korea, hunger made enemies of neighbors. To survive, some reported others, trading lives for an extra bowl of porridge. Jin-hee's pulse quickened. Had Mrs. Kang seen her adjusting the sleeve where the rice was hidden? Or was it just paranoia? Walking home, she whispered to herself, "Don't look afraid. Don't let them see." Yet inside, her stomach knotted. She realized the rice wasn't her only secret anymore. The true danger wasn't just the soldiers. It was everyone, neighbors, friends, even family, because survival had turned them into spies. The rice lay hidden beneath the floorboard of Jin-hee's hut, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Every time she glanced at the spot, her heart ached with a mixture of hope and fear. That handful of grains could mean survival or her death. That night, she measured out the smallest portion. Boiling it in a dented pot while her children sat quietly, their eyes shining with desperate anticipation, she told them, "Eat slowly, pretend it's more than it is." Her voice cracked as she ladled out the watery mixture. Her son, barely 7, whispered, "Amma, are you not hungry?" She smiled and shook her head, hiding the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. The truth was, her hunger had become a constant companion, an ache so deep it felt like her very bones were hollow. As the children ate, she looked out the small window toward the road. In the distance, she could see the faint outlines of Korean soldiers patrolling, their boots striking against the frozen ground. Every sound of their march carried a message. "We are watching. We own you." By morning, hunger returned sharper, crueler. Her youngest daughter whimpered, clutching her stomach. Jin-hee could do nothing but press her hand against the child's back, whispering lullabies that were more for comfort than nourishment. The rice was running out too quickly. The village gathered at midday for community duty, a forced labor task where men and women were ordered to repair fences, clear snow, or scrub the paths leading to statues of the leaders. Jin-hee's body felt weak, yet she dared not falter. Those who stumbled were beaten, sometimes dragged away under the accusation of laziness, which the regime called treason. The work was endless. Her hands grew raw as she scrubbed ice from the base of a bronze statue, her breath white in the air. Around her, others worked in silence, too afraid to speak, too broken to rebel. As the day ended, Gin-hee noticed Mrs. Kong again, lingering nearby, her gaze fixed on her with unsettling intensity. A chill ran through Gin-hee. The rice hidden beneath her floor was a blessing, but it was also a curse. Each grain carried the weight of suspicion, betrayal, and the threat of death. That night, the village was cloaked in silence, broken only by the wind howling against the thin walls of Jin-hee's hut. The children huddled together under a patched quilt, their breathing shallow with hunger. Jin-hee sat by the corner, staring at the wooden floorboards beneath which the rice was hidden. Every creak of the house felt like a threat. Then came the knock. 3 sharp taps on the door. Gin-hee froze, her heart slamming in her chest. At this hour, no visitor meant safety, only danger. She opened the door slowly, and there stood Mrs. Kang, her face half hidden in the shadows. "I saw you," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with warning. Jin-hee's blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean," Jin-hee stammered. Mrs. Kang leaned closer, her breath carrying the sour scent of malnutrition. "You had rice. I saw your child chewing something more than soup. Don't worry, I won't tell the Korean soldiers. But her voice dropped lower, almost serpentine. I need some. My grandson is sick. He won't last another week. Ginhee's mind raced. If she refused, Mrs. Kang might betray her. If she agreed, her own children might starve sooner. The choice was unbearable. With trembling hands, she lifted the floorboard and scooped a handful of grains into a rag. Mrs. Kang snatched it quickly, her eyes glinting with a strange mix of gratitude and hunger. You've saved me, she whispered, before slipping back into the darkness. Ginhee sat trembling, her back pressed against the wall, tears stinging her eyes. She knew she couldn't trust anyone in this village, not even those who smiled. Survival had made neighbors into predators, mothers into informants. Later that night, her eldest daughter, Sujin, whispered, Amma, what if she tells the soldiers anyway, eh? Ginhee wrapped her arms around her child, though her own fear matched the girl's words. She pressed her lips against Sujin's hair and murmured, then we must be stronger. We must endure. But deep inside, Ginhee knew the truth. Every grain of rice had now become a secret that weighed heavier than stone. The next morning, Ginhee awoke to the sound of boots crunching outside. Her stomach tightened. She peeked through the torn fabric that covered the window. 2 Korean soldiers stood at the edge of the lane, their rifles slung carelessly, eyes scanning the huts. She pulled the children closer, whispering for them not to make a sound. Every nerve in her body screamed that Mrs. Kang's whisper from the night before had already turned into a knife at her back. She tried to breathe, but each breath felt shallow, fragile, as though even the sound of her lungs might betray her. By midday, the soldiers had left, but the fear lingered. Ginhee stepped outside to fetch water, her eyes darting nervously to Mrs. Kang's house. The older woman greeted her with a faint nod, but something in her expression unsettled Ginhee to calm, too empty. Trust was dissolving, like frost melting under a sun that burned too fiercely. That evening, Sujin asked a question Ginhee had been avoiding. Amma, why do we have to hide rice? Why can't the government give us food if they care for us? The innocence in her daughter's voice cut like glass. Ginhee forced a smile, though her throat ached. Because we must be strong, my love. Because sometimes the world is unfair. She wanted to say more, to tell her children the truth of the regime, the lies of the rallies, the cruelty of the inspections. But every word unsaid was safer. Even walls had ears. At night, she dreamt of iron gates slamming shut, of her children being dragged away by faceless guards. She woke, drenched in sweat, clutching her chest. The rice beneath the floorboards was no longer food, it was a curse, a beacon that could summon death at any moment. The betrayal had not yet come, but its shadow loomed larger each day. Ginhee could feel it pressing down on her like the heavy stone walls of a prison closing in. One whisper, one slip, one glance too long, and everything she loved could be torn away. The week dragged on, each day heavier than the last. Hunger gnawed at Ginhee's children so sharply that even the sound of boiling water seemed to make their stomachs cry out. She gave them smaller portions from the hidden rice, saving only enough to keep their bodies moving, but her own share grew thinner. She chewed slowly, pretending to eat when she wasn't, forcing a smile so her children wouldn't notice the weakness crawling into her bones. The silence of survival was suffocating. Ginhee found herself whispering less, laughing never, and even speaking only when necessary. She feared her own voice. What if one wrong word slipped? What if her children repeated something dangerous in the village square? She taught them games without sound, tracing pictures on the dirt floor, humming only when the wind howled loud enough to cover it. The Korean soldiers returned often now, their boots leaving sharp imprints in the mud outside. They would shout questions at neighbors, demanding if anyone was hoarding, if anyone was hiding. Each time, Ginhee pressed her palm over Sujin's mouth, her heart racing with the terror that the soldiers might storm in. She lived like a prisoner inside her own home, trapped by both fear and silence. One evening, Mrs. Kang appeared at her door, carrying a small bundle of wilted greens. Her eyes flickered nervously. "You should be careful, Ginhee," she said softly, placing the bundle down. "They're watching more closely now." Her words sounded kind, but beneath them lay a warning. Or was it a threat? Ginhee couldn't tell. Trust was a currency too expensive to afford. That night, Sujin asked again why they couldn't just tell the truth, that they were hungry, that they needed food. Jinhei pulled her close, whispering fiercely, "Because in this land, the truth can kill us." The girl's eyes widened, her small body trembling against her mother's chest. Jinhei realized then that survival in North Korea wasn't just about food, it was about silence. Silence became their only weapon, their only shield. Yet silence was also a chain, tightening around her throat, threatening to choke her before the regime even had to. The night was heavy, its silence broken only by the restless breathing of her children. Jinhee lay awake, her body frail, but her mind sharper than ever, counting the seconds between the wind's sighs outside. She was about to drift into shallow sleep when it came, 3 sharp knocks against the wooden door. Her blood froze. Midnight was not the hour for neighbors, nor for kindness. Midnight belonged only to Korean soldiers and their suspicions. Jinhei's hands trembled as she pressed her children down beneath the thin blanket. "Don't move. Don't breathe," she whispered, her voice a hiss of desperation. The knocking came again, harder this time, and then a voice barked her name. "Open the door, comrade. Jinhei." She forced herself to stand, though her knees felt like breaking reeds. Sliding the door open just enough, she was met with the glare of 2 Korean soldiers, their rifles slung across their shoulders, their eyes cold and predatory. One of them shoved the door wider with his boot, stepping inside uninvited. "Inspection," he announced flatly. "We've heard whispers that rice has gone missing in this block. Do you have anything to confess?" Jinhee's mouth went dry. Her heartbeat hammered in her ears, louder than any sound in the room. She shook her head slowly. "No, comrade. Nothing." The taller soldier began rummaging through the small cupboards, overturning bowls, scattering scraps of fabric across the dirt floor. He lifted the lids of empty jars and sniffed them as though they could betray her. Her children, hidden under the blanket, dared not move. One soldier leaned close, so near she could smell the stale tobacco on his breath. "If we find you hiding food," he whispered, his words slicing like a blade, "your children will grow up in an orphanage. Do you understand?" Jinhee nodded, fighting back the tears that burned her eyes. After what felt like an eternity, they left, leaving the room in chaos but finding nothing. When the door slammed shut, Jinhei collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking violently. The children crawled out, clinging to her. That night, Jinhee realized survival was not only about feeding her family, it was about outlasting suspicion itself. And suspicion never slept. The winter deepened, and with it, hunger. Jinhei's ribs pressed against her thin skin, and her children's cheeks had hollowed into shadows. The rice she had hidden was nearly gone, and every day she measured the grains as though they were time itself slipping away. Her daughter, Sumin, had grown quieter in recent weeks. She no longer laughed, no longer hummed the soft songs Jinhei once whispered to lull her to sleep. Instead, her dark eyes carried a weight too heavy for a child. Jinhee noticed, but hunger drowned out questions. One evening, as the family huddled around a small clay lamp, Sumin broke the silence. The mother. "If we told the officials about the rice, they might forgive us. They might give us more." The words struck Jinhee like a slap. She dropped the bowl she was holding, and it cracked against the floor. Fear surged into her throat. "Never say that again," she hissed, clutching her daughter's shoulders. "Do you understand? The Korean soldiers do not forgive. They take always." Sumin flinched, tears glistening in her eyes. But Jinhei saw something else there. It's a conflict. Her daughter was old enough to feel the pull of survival, but too young to understand betrayal's final price. That night, Jinhei lay awake, staring into the dark. She thought of the school propaganda. The endless chants drilled into the children. Trust the state, love the leader, report the betrayers. Her daughter had been raised in that world more than in her arms. The next morning, when Sumin slipped out of the house earlier than usual, Jinhee's heart sank. She followed at a distance, her bare feet crunching softly on the frosted ground. And then she saw it. Sumin speaking in hushed tones to a neighborhood watch officer, her small hands gesturing nervously. Jinhee's chest constricted. The world seemed to tilt around her. Her daughter, her blood, her life was being swallowed by the machine of fear. She wanted to scream, to run, to drag Sumin away. But instead, she turned back quietly, her tears falling silently onto the frozen earth. That day, Gin-hee understood the cruelest truth of all. In North Korea, even love could be weaponized. The morning after Sumin's whispered betrayal, the knock came. Heavy, deliberate, echoing through the frail walls of Jin-hee's home. She did not need to open the door to know who it was. The Korean soldiers waited outside, their boots crunching on the frozen earth, their shadows slicing through the window. Her children trembled inside the single room, their eyes wide. Sumin would not look at her. The girl's small hands clutched her skirt, twisting it in silence, guilt and fear warring in her face. Gin-hee's heart ached, but her choice was already made. She stepped forward, straightening her spine, though her body felt as fragile as dry reeds. She opened the door slowly, letting the icy air rush in. The Korean soldiers barked her name. Behind them, villagers watched with hollow eyes, eager to distance themselves from her fate. "I hid rice," Jin-hee confessed, her voice steady. "It was mine alone. My children knew nothing." The lie burned her throat, but it was all she could offer. A shield of words to keep the machine from devouring what little remained of her family. The officer smirked, scribbled in his ledger, and motioned for her to follow. As they led her away, she turned once, memorizing the sight of her children framed by the doorway. Sumin's eyes overflowed with tears, her lips trembling as if she wanted to scream, but no sound came. Jin-hee smiled, weak but full of love, and mouthed the words she had whispered to them every night. "Endure, live." The Korean soldiers shoved her toward the waiting truck. She stumbled but did not resist. Every step was a sacrifice, every breath a gift she was leaving behind. That night, in a cold detention cell, Jin-hee lay on the floor, her body aching, her stomach hollow, yet in her heart, a fragile peace flickered. She had given her children one last chance, the only gift she had left to give. And somewhere in the darkness of North Korea, a mother's sacrifice became an unspoken prayer that one day her children might walk free beneath a sky not ruled by fear.